Welcome to Holmy Horror. I've been waiting for you. The Piemaker. Victorian London was a city of stark contradictions. Grand halls of opulence stood in close quarters with festering alleyways where the downtrodden struggled to survive. The East End in particular was a place of shadows, shadowy dealings, shadowy figures, and shadowy fates. Among its crooked cobblestone streets sat a modest bakery that bore a hand-painted sign reading Finch's Pies. The sweet, savory aroma of Finch's wares wafted through the air, curling into the nostrils of passers-by. It was an irresistible scent that drew in everyone. Working-class families, curious travelers, and the occasional aristocrat, slumming it for a taste of authentic London. The pies were lauded for their perfect balance of flaky crust and rich, meaty filling, a culinary marvel unmatched by any other. Behind the counter was Edgar Finch, the bakery's owner and only employee. He was a jovial man with a rotund belly, a neatly trimmed mustache, and an infectious laugh that echoed through the shop. He greeted each customer as though they were a lifelong friend, always ready with a joke or a kind word. But Finch's pies had a secret. One so dark it would send even the most hardened criminal into a fit of nausea. The pie's infamous flavor came not from skill, spices, or secret recipes, but from something unspeakable. Human flesh. The disappearances began as whispers among the East End's residents. A woman gone missing from her evening stroll, a dock worker who failed to come home, a child who never returned from running an errand. The police, understaffed and overworked, dismissed these cases as the unfortunate byproducts of living in a sprawling city rife with poverty and crime. Edgar heard these rumors with barely concealed amusement. He knew precisely where these missing people had gone. They were in his pies, minced, seasoned, and baked to golden perfection. Edgar had been perfecting his grim craft for years. It began during his apprenticeship at another bakery, where he'd experimented with adding various meats to stretch limited supplies. One fateful night, a drunken argument with a colleague had turned violent. Edgar, in a fit of rage, had struck the man down with a rolling pin. As he stood over the body, an idea formed in his twisted mind. Why let good meat go to waste? His first batch of pies made with human flesh sold out within hours. The taste, he realized, was unlike anything else. Rich, savory, and strangely satisfying. His customers raved about the flavor, demanding more. From that day forward, Edgar's path was set. Edgar's victims were carefully chosen. He targeted society's invisible people, the homeless, sex workers, drunks staggering home in the dead of night. They were the ones no one would miss, and the ones most likely to follow a kind stranger, offering food or shelter. One particularly cold evening, Edgar spotted a boy no older than 10 huddled under a tattered blanket near a street lamp. The child was painfully thin, his cheeks hollow, his eyes wide with hunger. "Cold night, isn't it?" Edgar said, approaching with a genial smile. The boy eyed him warily, but said nothing. "Come on, lad. I've got a warm fire and fresh bread in my shop. No need to freeze out here." The boy hesitated but ultimately nodded, the promise of food and warmth outweighing his instincts. Edgar placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, guiding him back to the bakery. Inside, the boy marveled at the smells and sights of the shop. Edgar placed a steaming meat pie before him, watching as the child devoured it with desperate hunger. "What's your name?" Edgar asked. "Charlie," the boy mumbled between bites. "Charlie," Edgar repeated, his voice soft and almost tender. "That's a good, strong name." The boy finished the pie and looked up with gratitude. "Thank you, sir," Edgar smiled. "You're welcome, lad." He struck with the efficiency of a practiced predator, jabbing a needle into the boy's neck. Charlie's eyes widened in shock before his small body went limp. The basement of Finch's Pies was a place of horrors hidden beneath the cheerful bakery. A single gas lamp illuminated the room, casting long, flickering shadows across blood-stained walls. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the sickly sweet scent of decay. Hooks dangled from the ceiling, and a butcher's block dominated the center of the room, its surface worn and darkened by years of use. Edgar carried Charlie's limp body down the creaking stairs, humming a cheerful tune. He laid the boy on the block and began his grim work. With the precision of a surgeon, he removed limbs, stripped flesh, and discarded what couldn't be used. The meat was ground and seasoned, mixed with herbs and spices to mask any lingering humanity. By morning, Charlie would be just another ingredient in Finch's famous pies. Unbeknownst to Edgar, his dark deeds had not gone unnoticed. Detective Inspector James Kavanagh of Scotland Yard had been tasked with investigating the recent wave of disappearances. While many of his colleagues dismissed the cases as unrelated, Kavanagh saw a pattern. The missing were all last seen in the vicinity of Finch's pies, and Kavanagh couldn't ignore the odd coincidence. One rainy morning, Kavanagh decided to pay the bakery a visit. The bell above the door jingled as Kavanagh entered, his coat dripping from the persistent drizzle outside. Edgar looked up from behind the counter, his face lighting up with his usual smile. "Good morning. What can I get for you, sir?" Kavanagh's sharp eyes scanned the shop, taking in the spotless counters and neatly arranged trays of pies. The air was filled with that intoxicating aroma, but Kavanagh forced himself to stay focused. "A meat pie, if you please," he said casually. Edgar handed over the pie with practiced charm. "You won't find better anywhere in London." Kavanagh took a bite, chewing slowly as he studied the baker's face. The flavor was incredible, but the thought of what it might contain made his stomach churn. "Delicious," he said, masking his unease. "Do you make these yourself?" "Every last one," Edgar replied with a grin. "It's a labor of love." Convinced that Edgar was hiding something, Kavanagh returned that night with a team of constables. They positioned themselves around the bakery, ensuring that the baker couldn't escape. Kavanagh entered through the back door, his revolver drawn. The basement was worse than he could have imagined. The butcher's block, the blood-stained tools, the hooks, it was a vision of hell. But what froze Kavanagh in his tracks was the pile of discarded body parts in the corner. Edgar appeared behind him, silent as a ghost. "Inspector," he said, his voice calm and steady, "you shouldn't be here." Kavanagh turned, his revolver trained on the baker. "It's over, Finch. You're under arrest." But Edgar wasn't done yet. With a speed that belied his size, Edgar lunged at Kavanagh, wielding a cleaver. The two men grappled, knocking over trays and sending knives clattering to the floor. Edgar fought like a man possessed, his eyes wild with fury. "You'll ruin everything," he roared. "They love my pies." Kavanagh managed to land a blow to Edgar's head with the butt of his revolver, dazing him long enough to bind his hands with a length of rope. "It's over," Kavanagh said, dragging him upstairs. The trial of Edgar Finch was the sensation of the year. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse daily, eager to catch a glimpse of the man now known as the Piemaker of London. Edgar showed no remorse, even as he was sentenced to death by hanging. As he stood on the gallows, Edgar scanned the crowd, his eyes settling on a young man standing at the back. The man was clean-cut, wearing a crisp apron. Edgar smiled, a genuine smile this time, just as the noose tightened around his neck. The young man returned the smile before slipping away into the crowd. Months later, a new bakery opened in a neighboring borough. Its sign read, "Caldwell's Pies," and the locals raved about the flavor. Kavanagh, now retired, read about it in the paper, and felt a chill run down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that Edgar Finch's dark legacy was far from over. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling stories. And remember, be careful. I'll be watching you.